I'm Shane Albarani. This is Ben Boudreau, and we're talking about the 7-game road trip that the Komets had in January. So we're breaking down all of the games. We've already had the first half of this road trip. It's in the books. Komets win in Indy. They lose 2 in Toledo, 1 in a shootout. So right now you are
3 out of 6
yes,
points.
Right.
So Shane hasn't been in math class for a little while. I felt I'd step in there.
So we are going down to the sunshine. And like you said, when we closed out the first episode, a year ago, we were going to Newfoundland. So now we're going down south for the first time in, I think, 5 years to play the Everblades. So, you know what, we get on the bus, we get on the flight, and we are headed down south. We get a nice day off in South Florida. So we get down to South Florida. Now this is, you know, it's been a pretty eventful road trip up to this point, but now it's going to get very eventful as we go into Florida for that game against the Everblades. And what makes this one really interesting is that a lot of Komet fans were there. There was probably around 200 or 300 there in the crowd there. So it was almost like it turned into a de facto home game for the Komets because the Komet fans that night were very loud. So Komet fans travel well. So that was, you had the confidence that you had fans in the stands going into enemy territory.
You circle this one on the calendar when the season comes out. I mean, outside of the hockey, it's a great experience. You're up in the north in Indiana, cold weather. I mean, then you get to go down to the Sunshine State and relax a little bit and try to catch some rays you haven't seen since the summertime. So I think a lot of our guys were excited, and there was a slight change to our schedule actually right before this happened. We were slated to play Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and then the schedule had changed and building availability. And I believe they moved that Saturday game to the Thursday. So now we're playing 3-3 with a 6-hour road trip in between. And so that day off, which I believe was the Tuesday, Monday we spent traveling, but a lot of people had family or friends, including myself. My wife's family was there. My wife and my son had flown down for the trip. And so a lot of people were excited because they had a lot of familiarity, surrounded themselves on a road trip like that. A lot of Komet fans, a lot of friends, a lot of family. And so, it was going to be a big week for us because we knew a lot of people would have been traveling with us to Jacksonville as well. And you try to enjoy that one off day in the sunshine, try to get your mind right a little bit, try to get soak up those rays. But we knew at the point of the season where we were in February with where we were in the standings. And so anytime you lose back-to-back games against your division rivals, I mean, the next one is that much more important. And so the weight of that game coming up the next day was I don't know about the players, but for me personally, you knew that there was a lot of stress going into that one because you needed to take that. You were playing another team that was tops in their division, tops in the league, and we knew that they were going to be really, really tough, and you've got people watching. So we wanted to start out that road trip on the right foot. We wanted to get game one of that week, but as we'll go through it, it didn't work out that way. So there was a lot going into that first game on that road trip.
And we get to we get down to Hertz Arena down in Estero, Florida. We walk through the doors, and who do we see but Cody Sol? And he's going to play into the story, into this game. But Cody, of course, ex-Komet, fan favorite. Everyone loves Cody. We've played him. He signed in Toledo to start the season, gets traded to Cincinnati. So we see him a couple times in Cincinnati, gets traded down to Florida, and we get to see him again.
Yeah, and, a guy like Cody, first off and foremost, I love this man for the person that he is.
Yeah, both do. Yeah.
He is just a great human being away from the rink, the way he handled Komets fans, the way he was interacting out in the community. I mean, I love Cody for the person he is. And, for the whole changeover and everything, it was... it was a changing of the guard. Get some new core guys in there, and he was part of that mix with the Hodgman and the Shasmas, and that was looking to go on to greener pastures. And so it just worked out for the way where Florida had picked up a good defenseman in Cody Sol, and we had seen him down there. So he was on the ice, but I know he was just as anxious to see a lot of old teammates. Him and Sid were hanging out, I think, the day before and everything like that too. So a familiar face as far as away as Florida was a welcoming sight.
And Florida, a very tough team. You played them at the Coliseum back in November, and you got a 4-2 win. So you knew a little bit what they were about. But this team, just like the ECHL, the rosters move around so much. So you kind of take that game at November and just kind of throw it out.
Yeah, at Craig Brush is the general manager. He was just inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame for the East Coast. You know that these guys are always at the top of their game, bringing in some of these best recruits. I mean, a lot of people look at Fort Wayne and would expect the same thing out of David Franke. And so anytime you're going into Florida, you know these guys are going to be good. And if you give them anything less than your best game, you're not going to come out with a lot of success. So, there was pressure playing into it. You didn't want to get out of a playoff spot. You had a lot of people coming to see. We had just lost 2 against our division rival. There was a lot leading up to this game. And, for a first-year coach, I remember this is the point in my own personal career where you started to feel, the heat. It felt like you were sitting right under a hot lamp there a little bit because, the fans of Fort Wayne come to expect success, and we were trailing off at this point, and we were hanging on to a playoff position. So this was the moment where you didn't want to continue to lose. You wanted to find a way to regroup. So we were putting a lot into the start of this week and the second half of the road trip.
So we all know what happened in Jacksonville, but you don't realize that really it kind of started in Florida. But to start this game off, it was actually unique because they actually honored a Komet. Norm Wisloski was honored, who lives down there. He was honored. He dropped the first puck. So it already had a Komet feel. This is our night. We've got our fans. We've got our legend dropping the first puck. Let's get after it. And you really did in the first period. You took it to him. Again, couldn't score. Could not score in the first period. You outshoot him 8-2. You limited him to 2 shots, but again, could not get a goal.
Here's, by the way, there are 2 shots were icing attempts.
That's right.
That were put under net. So technically, we dominate the first 20 minutes, and they don't even get a single shot outside of the icings that they put on the net. And so we're feeling great. Like, our players were prepared to play, and they came out and played the right way. So it's never a good feeling when you dominate a team that much and you still tied 0-0. And that was the frustrating feeling with Toledo because we had felt that we had gotten to that point. And so, I think the game plan at this, and I remember, was, hey, stay with it. Stay with this thing, because something's bound to crack open here. And for anybody that doesn't play hockey, and I'm going to set the stage here, the ice in Florida or any warm climate is not ice, it's slush. It is so difficult that after the first 5 minutes to do anything that if you don't have a lead or if you're trailing, it's extremely difficult in Florida because you can't make the plays that you'd be typically making here with some good ice because it was just so bad. It was mush. And so when you wanted to play with skill or you wanted to do things with the puck, it was extremely difficult. And that came into play a little bit later on in the game where we were behind and we just couldn't make one pass to the tape. It was just real bad ice.
So we go into the second period. We're scoreless. This is where things got a little nutty. Cole Kaler was your starting goaltender that night. Now, this was probably a situation where, again, you got 3 goaltenders. You were probably hoping to get Dylan Ferguson in this game, but Cole Kaler, he starts and gives up the first 2. And you mentioned he was a little streaky. He played 2 outstanding games on this road trip to start it off, but this night you could tell he was just a little off.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because you remember these games, home opener against Kalamazoo, how good he was, in Indy, and there's the wheeling games in there. There was a lot of games where Cole was just absolutely at his best, and he was very human-like in this first one. And when you need to play a game at the absolute top, you need everybody in your roster to bring their A game. And I'm not putting the blame on Cole. It's not what I'm doing, right. But just a matter of we had seen him play so much better that's what you come to expect from them. And so it was difficult. I think they potted two goals at the start of the second in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so that was a tough way to start the second period.
45 seconds into the second period.
45 seconds. It was like somebody took a pin and popped the bubble and let all of the air out.
So you're down 2-0. And at the 13:03 mark of the second period, this is where things got crazy. We talked about Cody Sol. He plays into this storyline. And this was something I didn't see. I was looking away from the play. It happened at the end of the play. But it was Drake Rimsha, who was going back to the bench. I think he cross-passed with Cody Sol. And Cody kind of gave him a little pop to the head.
Yeah, I mean, that's the PG version of it.
You give the version. You were right there in front of it.
I mean, one of the things we knew coming into play, Cody had been a former Komet, and, we wanted to kind of try to get him off his game a little bit. So get into his year, try to get him focused on the fact that, hey, we're here in your kitchen. And I believe Drake was saying something as he was coming off the ice and nudged him. And I don't think it was intentional. I don't believe that Cody is this type of person. But he had a stick in his hand, and he turned around to slash him. But his momentum took it right to the face. So if anybody was watching, because the refs obviously weren't, they would have seen a two-hand slash to the face of Drake Grimshaw. Now his helmet and stick made contact, and it was like a firecracker going off. Right to the face, he drops, and then everybody looks because nobody was. It was in between.
Yeah,
whistles.
right. It was during a line change. You're right.
And so I'm thinking somebody must have seen this. This is a power play, and they didn't see it. There was nothing called, and I'm saying this is a vicious play, and I don't know how we weren't. And to me, that was the moment of the frustration from a coaching standpoint. You sensed it from a player standpoint. You want to be protected. You want to make sure that they're seeing these things and people are being held accountable. And, at this point it was a one-off. Okay, we didn't get the call. I thought it was a vicious play, and if the ref saw it, it was probably a 5 in a game. But, it goes on, and we're coming back, and we're trying to make a game out of this. And I know it's going to get a little bit more intense here as the game goes along.
So no penalty was called on that, but just a few minutes later, you get into a melee in front of your bench where you got everybody grabbing each other, everybody... it turned into AJ Jenks actually getting a misconduct, and he was done for the night. But there was no majors called. There was no fighting majors. There was punches thrown. I remember Sean Sadlowski kind of got tossed down and being drugged by his arm a little bit. It's when you get like that, and we'll see in a little bit when we go to Jacksonville. That's such a dangerous situation when you have that happening at the bench. And I remember saying this on air. All of that could have been avoided if you put Cody Sol in the box for 4 minutes.
Yeah. Or you would have sent the message that it's not okay. And our players are down in Florida, and you hear stories that the refereeing, and again, I hope the ECHL doesn't see this because I'm not trying to put anything on the refs, but it wasn't the level of refereeing wasn't the same as you'd find in the North, and so that was our first experience. Okay, we just got two-handed in the face, and there's no call. And then Kyle Newber, who's an infamous tough guy, and I wouldn't want to be in a back alley with him. We got into a little fisticuffs, and next thing you know, he's jumping over into a crowd right at the bench, and there's a 5-on-5 melee, and it kind of broke loose, but they didn't kick Newber out. They gave him a 10-minute misconduct, if I'm not mistaken. And so we've got a player flying into our bench to instigate some fights here. And I thought it was a little wild that he stayed in the game. AJ got kicked out, and he had come and challenged the entire bench. And so I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a rough division. We knew that these teams had some pretty tough guys, and this is the way it was, the way they were going to play the game.
And also, Drake Grimshaw scored a goal. It was 2-1. Sean Sadlowski ties it up, and all that happened, it was right after Sadlowski scored that goal. So you're now tied at 2, but now you've got the momentum, but now the game has come to a screeching halt.
Yeah. 100%. And I don't know if it was by design or whatever it was, but it was a tough game. I think it was a really turning point. We had a young team, a lot of guys on the East Coast for their first year, trying to figure out what it was like. And, it was an intimidating game. I think we scratched Matt Bowden's that game, which I'll always remember was a mistake for that one. And I'll put that one on myself. I believe I told him that night. And we just didn't have the horses in that fight. And
maybe it would have been, with Bowden's in there, maybe that would have been okay because perhaps if Matt Bowden was in, he could have been suspended or anything like
100%,
that.
100%. And you never knew. I knew Hauser was in the box and Stewie and all those guys too. And so just for that, it kind of set the tone for the next 2 days in Jacksonville. And the whole thing, when it was said and done, there wasn't any video. And I believe it was a rule, and we tried to send it in and said, how do you not see this stuff? And there was no recollection of it. There was no proof of it, and which was a little bit frustrating as a coach because this organization prides themselves on doing so much, and they didn't have it at the time. And so, when we're trying to send in video, trying to show them the play, they didn't have anything there. So it was frustrating from a coaching standpoint because we're trying to protect our players. We wanted to say to the league, this is not okay. The way they played, their hits to the head, we wanted to protect them, and we weren't able to send them in any footage because they didn't have it. And so that was kind of the start to get this whole ball rolling going into Jacksonville.
So going back to the Florida game, we're still in it. We're going to the end of the second period. You're tied 2-2, so it's a good game at this point. But you gave up a goal in the first minute of the second period, 45 seconds in, and then you give up the go-ahead goal with just a minute left, a little over a minute left there in the second period, and that's the killer when you go into the dressing room down.
Yeah, now you've got to do everything you can to try to come from behind. And like I said before, anytime you're trying trying to make plays or do anything, you're in the third period on a hot day in February. The ice conditions weren't good, and that just led to the frustrations, is trying to do something typically you're used to, but you don't have the conditions to do it. So frustrating's mounting at this point. We had just lost 2 games. The travel was long. We weren't getting the calls going. Now we're losing another game and going into the third, trying to play catch up. You could tell from everybody the frustration level was starting to go.
And so in the third period, Florida scores 2. It's a 5-2 game. That's the final. That's the only game on this road trip that was not a 1-goal game. You also you get 33 shots on goal. You outshoot them, but I also kind of remember that game. You talked about the ice conditions. You didn't have very many quality chances on Kyle Appleby that night.
No, 100%. And a guy like Ken Appleby, who's way too good of a goalie to let anything easy in, unless you're getting inside the house quality chances, you were never going to beat a guy like this. And so, out of that entire road trip, I would say this is the furthest we were to having a chance to win the game.
And you end up getting 39 penalty minutes. Florida had 29. But amazingly, after all that, only 2 power plays for Florida, 3 for the Komets.
Yeah, I think we still scored on one at that point. I mean, we tried to, I think it was Sid that scored on the power play too. And so, that was, we were going to see Florida twice. We won 1 on home ice. They won 1 on home ice. And, your next thought is, okay, we've started a 7-game road trip. We've won our first game. We've lost 3. I mean, now the pressure is starting to mount. If we didn't have the pressure going into that game 1, well, really in the second half of it, now facing a team that's not very high up in the standings, I mean, your expectation, where I think we're sitting 3rd or 4th in the division at this point in time, points were paramount at this point of the season. And so there was a lot going into this game. We had a long bus ride. I think it was 6 hours from Fort Myers into Jacksonville.
Yes, and that's something that people don't realize. You said that we were supposed to have an off day, travel day, but we didn't have that. So we had to get right on the bus and travel 6 hours to Jacksonville on a coach bus, which we would normally have the sleepers. So guys just played a game. Now we've got to sit up for the next 6 hours and roll in Jacksonville in the middle of the night.
I remember too, and typically our organization is unbelievable. They make sure everything is set for the guys. They travel first class, and so I don't want this to preconceive any notions that we're not doing anything at the very, very first class, because the Komets will take care of us anyway. But once they changed the schedule, we didn't have a sleeper bus there. We were given what we had access to, and I remember Jermaine Lowen was 6'6", sleeping with a shoe behind his leg or behind his head. We didn't have pillows that we brought down or anything like that. So it was a really tough road trip. No morning skate the next day, but I think we pulled into Jacksonville at 5 in the morning, and it was tough. You've played a lot of games. Now you're going into your 5th game on the road. You don't get a proper sleep the night before. There were difficult conditions, but the one thing I'll always say is there's no excuses. You show up on the ice, don't come up with any excuses. We knew that we had a battle in front of us.
Now this is when the fun starts in Jacksonville. We'll come back and talk about those 2 games in Jadeville.
We see him leave his skates, and we targeted his head, and he's down and out, and he's cut, and he's bleeding, and the ref's got nothing, and they said they've got nothing. He's got blood coming from his face, and we're saying, how do you not call a penalty drawing blood from the head?